SJ. Welcome to Mvskoke Radio, your weekly source for tribal and community news, interesting guests and discussions, plus a local events calendar. SJ, Stongo, Gary Fife, Jahu Jifkados, Mvskoke Radio, Mabu Hejidowejkiz. Welcome to our program here on 1240 The Brew. I'm Gary Fife, and we've got a couple of vastly different topics to share with you today. First of all, we will be speaking to a reporter for the Native Sun News in South Dakota about a situation involving the closure of some beer stores just across the reservation border, and how the controversy around that particular subject has affected the native residents and, of course, the store owners. Also, in the second part of our discussions today, we'll be talking with Chris Coburn and Elijah McIntosh about their Mvskoke Loan Fund and their recent efforts to teach young people how to handle money in a very real sense. They actually got to see their pile of cash diminish as they dealt with subjects of housing and transportation and taxes and all the things that us adults have to deal with. So an interesting plan they have. First of all, let me give you our sidewalk superintendent's view of the council house. The paint job looks superb. They've got the balconies in the south side put back up, and it looks wonderful. And now they're working on the fence on the front side of the building. I believe they're restoring it, putting the stones back and recreating that fence. Looking very good on this beautiful Oatmulgee day, although it is a little cool and crisp. We have time to get on with it. Let's just get on with it. First of all, let me welcome Kimberly to our program. Kimberly, are you there?
I'm here, yes.
Okay, now it's Grieger, right? Kimberly Grieger.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Gregor. Yes.
Gregor, thank you. And you are a reporter for Native Sun News, the publication there in the Lakota country, started and run by Mr. Tim Gallego, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, sometime back, we were made aware of a situation there on the border between the Pine Ridge Reservation and the town of White Clay, Nebraska. 4 stores there in White Clay were selling millions, and that is millions, of cans of beer to Pine Ridge residents just across the border, almost spitting distance across the border, resulting in monstrous social problems and, of course, some, I would presume, some fatalities and law enforcement problems and the general degradation of that culture. However, on the other side of the question, how far do you go in telling a private businessman what they can and can't do? But first of all, Kimberly, maybe you can fill us in just a touch on the history there, what you were aware of before this action by the Nebraska Liquor Control Commission and reactions that you've seen. But first of all, where did this come from?
Well, it started, alcohol has been sold in White Clay for more than 100 years now. And like you said, there's 4 beer stores in there of a population of 12 people in this little town. The problem is it's in an unincorporated village, so there's no way to pass any city ordinances or laws to prevent loitering and public intoxication and that kind of thing. And the closest law enforcement is in Rushville, which is 22 miles away. So there's, like you said, there's been lots of problems over the years with crime. There's been 4 unsolved murders in White Clay, and the beer stores they sold more than 10,000 cans of beer every day to people,
my God.
And that equals 2.4 million gallons a month of beer sold. And like you said, that was mainly to the Ogallala Lakota Sioux residents. The Pine Ridge Reservation border is only about 200 yards away from White Clay, so it's very close.
Right. You can throw a rock and hit the res there. Yeah, the situation has been going on for some time now, as we've said. Have there been any assessments of the impact of alcohol on the tribe? I mean, is there any formal surveys or anything like that? Anything that gives us some numbers or some indication of its impact?
Not to my knowledge, but the impact is vast and will continue for many generations, even if these stores don't get their liquor license renewed.
And the Oglala Lakotas are the tribe of Crazy Horse. So they've got an incredibly proud and long cultural history there of being just wonderful people. And
actually White Clay is located in Crazy Horse's old hunting ground.
Oh my gosh. What would he think of this if he were alive today?
Right.
Now let's, I guess, bring us up to the point where someone finally took some formal action.
Where some changes started happening.
Yeah.
So there's been protests for decades. People have been trying to get these beer stores closed down for years. But back in October in August of 2016, Sherry Wounded Foot was beaten in White Clay, and she died a few weeks later because of her injuries. And that sparked a huge outcry and a lot of action. In October of 2016, Senator Patty Brooks called a hearing with the Nebraska Legislature's General Affairs Committee, and it was at that hearing that finally a Sheridan County Commissioner, Jack Anderson, he finally told the committee, we absolutely do not have adequate law enforcement in White Clay. And that was the first time that an official had publicly recognized the problem of lack of law enforcement there. And that is kind of what started the ball rolling. From there, some Sheridan County residents filed a formal protest to the Nebraska Liquor Control Commission to protest the renewal of these liquor store licenses. All 4 beer stores, their license all expired on April 30th. And so that formal protest that the Sheridan County residents filed enabled the commission to hold hearings. And they held 2 hearings, one in January, one in April, and based on what they found in those hearings, the evidence and testimony, they decided to deny the renewal of the license for the stores. And then, of course, their lawyer has filed appeals, and now it's in the Supreme Court. And we're just awaiting their decision. Right.
Of course, a lot of questions come to mind, and I've seen from some of the research I've done here that I've got quite a list here. But first of all, as the decision was made to deny the renewal of these licenses, what was the reaction from the Oglala people there and its tribal government?
Well, to be honest, the reactions are mixed. There's still quite a few residents of Ogallala, the nation there, that want White Clay to stay open. But I think the general consensus felt by most people was finally a sense of justice. Frank Lemire, he's a Winnebago activist. He was at the hearing when they made their decision, and he wept openly. I mean, it was a really historical moment. But there are still some people who don't like this. They don't think the stores should have closed.
Now, that's from the tribe itself now?
The tribe itself, yeah.
Yeah, I don't mean...
And Sheridan County residents, too.
Right.
People all over.
We were going to get to the flip side of that coin. Now, obviously, the owners and entrepreneurs behind these 4 stores were unhappy about it. What did you hear from them and perhaps any other residents of the town or the area? What was their reaction?
Well, I didn't go to the April hearing where there was more testimony. I went to the one in January, and the owners did testify there. And their stance is basically that they have a legal product and they're not breaking any laws, and this is their livelihood and they should be allowed to continue it. Residents of the towns surrounding White Clay want the White Clay stores to stay open because they don't want the problems that were going on in White Clay to come to their town.
Kind of an interesting juxtaposition between people wanting to make a profit and those who don't want this problem to come to their town. Not in my backyard.
Well, yeah, it was really interesting, I thought, in particular, because, people like the Rushville Police Department, and I've been trying to get information on statistics and stuff, and not a lot of people want to talk about numbers there and stuff, but all the residents in Rushville, they didn't really, seemed like they kind of turned a blind eye to what was going on in White Clay, and they didn't really think it was a problem. But on May 15th, 2 weeks after the stores closed, they implemented several ordinances in their own town to prevent loitering and public drinking and public intoxication and panhandling. So they implemented all these ordinances that White Clay couldn't itself to combat the problem. So I thought that was interesting.
Was one of the points they made, this as you made some allusion to it, but this is our business and you can't tell us what to do under the free enterprise system? Yeah,
but then there's the whole, I don't know if any of your listeners or if you've ever been to White Clay, but if you were ever there before the beer stores closed, you would have to literally have no sight. You'd have to be a blind person to not see, all of the infractions happening and people passed out in the streets and trash everywhere and people drunk everywhere and and all this is happening right on the doorsteps of the beer stores, and the owners saying that there is no problem and they don't see any issues is just kind of absurd.
News coverage. Let's shift to that for a second now. It
Okay.
seems like the Oglala Reservation there seems to be like a real ground zero kind of place for news establishments to want to come do the stories of the plight of the poor Indian, the alcoholic impact, poverty, et cetera, et cetera. We've seen major TV networks do stories on it. We've heard NPR's coverage. It's basically much of the same thing. Now, is that focus unfair? Is it painting the wrong picture of the tribe, or is this, really a part of the life there?
Is it really as bad as it's been portrayed here? It, parts of Pine Ridge are. It's the second poorest nation in the entire Western Hemisphere, second only to Haiti. So it is a pretty, it is devastating. The unemployment rate averages around 80%. The suicide rate, especially among teens, is something like 4 times the national average. It's a very desolate place in some areas, but there are also some very good things happening in Pine Ridge too.
Right. I want to get to that in a second. Now, and going back to the impact of the closure of these stores. Now, when I heard about it, I automatically thought, well, somebody's just going to jump in a car and drive to the next place down the road. Is that essentially what's happening?
Well, that is happening, and that was also a major concern for a lot of Nebraska residents, was they were afraid that drunk driving would become more of a problem. And I did try to get a hold of the OST and the Rushville Police Departments to get current numbers for today, but as far as I know, there's only been one fatality on the stretch of highway between White Clay and the nearest town, which is Rushville, and that was the beginning of July. So as far as, actual DUI, people being pulled over and stuff, I don't know what those numbers are.
Okay. Has there been any reaction from those local police departments? I guess anecdotally, have they said, our crime rates or our problem has increased? Have they mentioned that at all?
The Rushville sheriff has been unavailable for comment every time I've tried to contact them for comments about the situation. So I can't answer that. I have talked to the OST police and the president's office on Pine Ridge, and they've said that they haven't really seen much of an increase of a problem with bootlegging and that kind of thing on the reservation. But I also hear conflicting stories from residents too that it is a bigger problem now. So
I have actually tried to get some comment from that office also myself, and my calls were never returned. I even called Keeley Radio to see if they had someone who would talk to me, and so far we haven't heard a thing. But did the tribe, the formal government itself, ever issue some reaction or statement regarding the situation?
not that I'm aware of, they haven't. No.
Okay. Now, another factor affects this story here. As sometime back, there was a law passed by the tribal council that would allow sales of alcohol on the reservation. Is that correct?
Yeah, on August 13th in 2013, they held a public referendum vote, and they voted to repeal their alcohol ban on the reservation. 1,843 people voted for legalization, and 1,678 people voted against it. It has not come to fruition, though, because the Law and Order Committee has to pass an alcoholic beverage code before alcohol can be sold legally on Pine Ridge. And that document, to my knowledge, that is what's holding it up. That document hasn't been completed.
I got some mixed reaction myself, some feelings about that situation. I was thinking, well, perhaps the tribe can raise some revenue there to put back into programs to help people deal with the addiction and perhaps alleviate some situation. But in the same vein, I was thinking, well, then you bring the problem home. But is it better then to have it there, do you think, or allow these outside store owners to continue to make what I imagine is quite a nice profit?
Yes, these beer store owners were making quite a nice profit on the misery of lots of people. Do you want my personal opinion on that?
If you'd care to share it, I'd love to hear it.
Personally, I don't think that people should be able to sell alcohol in border towns to, at least not 200 yards away. White Clay, back in the 1800s, actually, unscrupulous white men came to the border of Pine Ridge to try to sell alcohol and knives to the natives there. And Chester Arthur created the White Clay Extension in 1882 to prevent that from happening. And so this has been a problem, their own government acknowledged more than 100 years ago. So as far as, no, I don't think the White Clay stores should be allowed to do what they've been allowed to do for years. As far as having alcohol on the reservation, that's a more complicated question.
Right. It sounds like
it would be, people are drinking, and it would be nice for them to have that revenue there, but at the same time, the revenue from what? Just more sickness and devastation. I don't know that it would be worth it.
Mm-hmm. The Indian America, Indian country across the nation has been undergoing a sobriety movement. Many people, as they grow out of their crazy youth, mature into a situation where they're thinking, well, maybe I got to get rid of this problem and this addiction that's affecting me in my life and family and culture and everything. Has any of that sobriety movement shown up there on that reservation and made any impact that you could see?
There has been. In particular, there's an organization that's actually located in White Clay called Lakota Hope, and your listeners can go to their website. It's lakotahope.org. They've been in White Clay for 14 years, ministering to the people are called the street people of White Clay, the people that used to drink in the streets, and they've kept in contact with several of them since the stores have closed, and it's really good to hear stories of people that have not drank at all since these stores closed. And, there's one man who stopped drinking and is applying to get his own business loan for a landscaping business. And so there are stories like that happening where people are finding sobriety and making something positive happen.
Is there much discussion of this topic among the Lakotas there?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and like I said, there's the opinions are, on both sides. There's some people that really disagree with this, and there's some people that have been praying for this to happen for years. I think it would be hard for you to talk to anybody on Pine Ridge and find one person who hasn't been affected by alcohol. So there's a lot of people that this gives them a sense of justice and a sense of, progress and hope. But there's also a lot of people who want to still drink and don't think that closing these stores is going to change the alcohol problem on Pine Ridge. And these closing these 4 stores, that in itself isn't going to fix the problem, but it's a huge step. I mean, just the distribution to that county in April, beer distributors distributed 56,927 gallons of beer to northern Sheridan County. And in June, they only distributed a little more than 50,000. So there is less beer going into that area. And even if people are going to the towns around there, it's not anywhere near what the stores in White Clay were selling. I have some numbers here. In Rushville, the beer stores in April sold 3,700 gallons of beer, and in June, they sold 12,900 gallons. Well, every month in White Clay, they sold 2.4 million gallons.
Oh, my gosh.
So it's a big difference.
What has the non-native community said about this? How have they reacted?
Well, which one? In Nebraska or South Dakota?
Well, anything that you can share there. I would presume Nebraska first of all, but then we have to hear from South Dakota also.
Yeah, well, I think that the Nebraska residents are still kind of worried that these problems are going to trickle out to other areas, and they might have to deal with these. There are some people who are happy. I mean, there's activists and there's people who wanted this to happen in all, both states, and so there's people that are happy about this change. I live in South Dakota, very close to Pine Ridge, and so people around here, I think, they think this is a good thing,
As this issue progresses, I understand that the liquor stores are appealing this decision, and there was a recent Supreme Court ruling on it?
Yes, on August 29th, they both sides had oral arguments in front of the Nebraska Supreme Court, and you can hear those. You can see the video of that on the Nebraska website, the Nebraska Justice website. But that happened because in April the commission decided to deny the licenses. Their lawyer then asked for a review of that decision, this is a lot of what they talked about on the 29th in front of the Supreme Court. It sounds like their lawyer, Andrew Snyder, the one representing the 4 beer stores, he didn't follow all the protocols needed for this review to be official. And so then the Attorney General filed an appeal to that. And so that's how it ended up in the Nebraska Supreme Court. And so they heard the arguments on the 29th, and I think that they're expected to give their ruling within 2 months or so. So it'll still be a little while before we know. But I have a feeling even if the Supreme Court upholds the Liquor Commission's decision, that the stores will still continue to appeal and fight. Because why wouldn't they? They've been making a lot of money doing this for a long time, and they want to keep doing it.
As you go about your everyday connections with the Lakotas up there, is this issue kind of something that's talked about a lot, say in the cafes or in the garages or on the street? I mean, is this something that's in front of people's mind?
I think it is. I think it is talked about quite a bit. Like I said, a lot of people have been affected by White Clay. A lot of people have lost family members and stuff as a direct result of the beer sold in White Clay. So this is in the forefront of a lot of people's minds. And there was lots of protests and a lot of activity happening this summer leading up to this decision. So now everybody's just kind of waiting to see what the Supreme Court decides.
This issue was covered by the native press and some elements of the mainstream press, and it was kind of kicked out in the open, so to speak. Has that kind of attention made people more aware? Do you hear reactions from other tribes, perhaps? Are you aware of that? Is anyone else saying anything?
As far as reactions from other tribes and stuff, I can't speak to that. I can't answer.
Well, that's just fine, but believe me, I know that the word is out about this situation. Well, where do we go from here, I guess? Waiting for the Supreme Court decision in a couple of months. Is the tribe planning something? Are there native spiritual groups perhaps involved in putting something together? What is it? Where's the tribe going now?
That I'm not sure. I think that they're just going to kind of wait to see how the Supreme Court rules. I have not heard about any kind of events or anything happening or being planned for this or because of this.
Okay. Well, Kimberly, I know this is a complicated issue. It's much larger than what we've discussed. At this point, is there something important that you'd care to add on or something you might want to underline for us here?
Well, just that despite the status of the liquor stores, there is a lot of things, there's a lot of changes happening in White Clay. There's a lot of groups that are affecting positive change. And so good things are happening, and that's trickling onto the reservation too. So I think overall this is a good thing, and I'm going to continue covering this issue. So your listeners can always go to the Native Son website. It's nativesunnews.today to see any of the stories that we do and the latest coverages that we post. Okay,
well, Lila Washte, a little bit of Lakota I learned from some of our friends. We appreciate your time here, Kimberly Grieger, a reporter for the Native Son News in South Dakota. We thank you for your time and kind of giving us an idea of what's happening and what the future might hold. We will be keeping our eye on this issue, so don't be too surprised if I give you a buzz sometime in the future to give us an update.
I'd be happy to. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you for your time, Mado. All right, we'll take a short pause here, and then we'll be back with a couple of gentlemen to tell us about what they've been doing in the area of youth financial literacy, teaching our young people how to handle money. Here on 1240 The Brew in beautiful Okmulgee, Oklahoma. Stay with us.
I just got kicked out of my house.
My girlfriend just broke up with me.
I'm worried I might hurt myself.
I feel so alone. Are you there?
I'm here. Here for you anytime, anywhere, 24/7. If you need help or know someone who needs help, please text CREEK to 741-741 from anywhere in the U.S. anytime about any type of crisis. A live trained crisis counselor will receive the text and respond quickly. No judging, just support during any type of crisis. Just text CREEK to 741-741. When suicidal behaviors are detected early, lives can be saved. Get free support at your fingertips 24/7 from the National Crisis Text Line. Help is available for anyone, anytime, anywhere. For more information about the prevention of suicide, or if you or someone you know needs help, please text the word CREEK to 741-741. This message is brought to you by Mvskoke Creek Nation Behavioral Health. Help support suicide prevention.
I'm Nelson Harjo Jr., Mvskoke Creek Nation Election Board Manager. Voter apathy is an all-time high. In recent elections, less than 10% of our enrolled citizens have voted. Vote. You make a difference.
For more information on registering to vote or the Mvskoke Creek Nation upcoming elections, visit the election board page on the tribal website at www.mcn-nsn.gov or call 918-732-7631.
Welcome back to Mvskoke Radio here on 1240 The Brew. We have in studio now Mr. Chris Coburn and our Secretary of the Nation and Commerce, Mr. Elijah McIntosh, and you say call you Eli, is it?
Yes, either one's fine. You
Okay,
can call me
well,
Eli or Elijah. I answer to both.
Okay, well, as long as we can be relaxed about it, that's fine with me. Now, the Mvskoke Loan Fund, of which you are the CEO, Mr. Coburn, has been doing some interesting presentations and campaigns to teach our young people how to handle money. And, it was something I probably would have sat through, but throughout my career, I've never had any money, so it doesn't make much difference. But now, let's get a quick capsule idea of the Mvskoke Loan Fund, what it is and what its mission is.
Okay, the Mvskoke Loan Fund is basically it's a community development financial institution, which it's referred to as a CDFI. It's a unique financial organization set up by the Department of the Treasury. The Mvskoke Creek Nation applied for a grant to create the Mvskoke Loan Fund, and the goal is really impact. And what I mean by impact is money impacts lives. So people need gainful employment to take care of their families. Businesses need to expand and employ others, and really inside that impact are kind of the things that we do to get there. We do business advising, business coaching. So if someone has an idea, or maybe they're an experienced person, maybe they've been a welder for 20 years and now they want to get their own rig and go out on their own and maybe employ others. We talk to them about, from that idea stage, putting together a business plan, coaching them and giving positive criticism about, hey, well, have you thought of this or have you thought of that, or we need to do these things differently. And some people may not be ready to actually make it happen. And other things, if they're ready, then we can give them advice on business structure, sole proprietor, LLC, things like that, and walk them through who to go to get those things set up. And some of those are viable candidates we can help them with financing. So we do business lending. All those are subject to credit and had a viable business plan. So that's part of what the Mvskoke Loan Fund does. So our name, we do more than what our name implies. Because really getting down to the impact idea, if people know how to handle money, it's like sports. You need to know the rules of the game you're playing. You need to know what's out of bounds, what's in bounds, what's a foul, what's not. How do I win? And so that really dials down basically to needing financial literacy, helping people understand how money works, how it impacts things, especially people that are disadvantaged already, perhaps, or struggling, like you said earlier, not having money. We all know what that's like. We want people to understand how money works, and the terms involved, so they know how to play the game, and hopefully they will be where they're in a positive situation in life. So if their business opportunity comes up, they can take advantage of that, or if the need for savings and why that's important, so they can absorb when life throws them a bad news.
Right. Now, referring my little comment there, it's like all journalists know we have to take a vow of poverty when we begin our careers. And doggone it, that sucker holds on to us. Now, Eli, tell me, what is the tribe, the nation's stake in supporting and assisting this program?
Within the Mvskoke Loan Fund, I think it reflects the tribe's commitment to really develop entrepreneurs within the nation. And that's what we try to do with our business planning services, and then also provide capital. It's more of a micro enterprise lending program as far as the lending aspect of it. And so within that, we're able to help kind of the target demographic that we're looking for is it's a lot of people who typically wouldn't be able to get a loan from a bank. And so some of the businesses that are financed under the Mvskoke Loan Fund, they can't go into a bank and get financed. And that's a real challenge within the Native American community. And so the Mvskoke Loan Fund, that's part of our solution for that, to help them get started.
We do some loans. We actually helped a couple communities this year to start some economic development projects. And so we've been able to help communities, but then we've also, one of the ones that I'm really proud of within Mvskoke Loan Fund is we've had a repeat borrower. We had a guy, he got a loan a couple years ago, and he set up a pilot escort service that escorts the wide loads down the road. And then he got his loan. He was able to pay his loan back, and now he's come back and he's got another loan. He was able to expand his business, hire another Creek citizen to help him with his business. And so I think that's a real sign of the success of the program and its importance. Within that, kind of what we're here today to talk about is the financial literacy event that we had yesterday. And as you mentioned, I mean, that's something I hear time and time again when we go around and talk about the financial literacy is that, man, I wish I'd had that when I was younger. I wish that somebody had taught me these skills when I was younger. And so as we lay out our financial literacy program, I mean, that's been a real goal of this administration. I've been here since January, and that's kind of what we started with the summer youth program. And the Mvskoke Loan Fund's really carrying the baton now with this program that they developed. And we're really targeting our youth right now. We're going to roll it out within the nation to focus more on the adults going forward a little bit. But I mean, the first step within when we developed a plan for the program was to target the youth. And I think the program that we had yesterday was really fantastic. We were at the Eufaula boarding school, and for the youth that were there, I think it was a really good event. We had smiles on their faces. I think they really learned a lot. And one of the aspects being there yesterday that I really enjoyed was helping the kids put their numbers together. And I hope I'm not jumping on Chris's feet too much, but they were given $50,000, such as a salary to work with. And then they had to go around and they had to either, for their housing, they had to either rent an apartment or buy a house, make a decision on how much their housing expenses were going to be throughout the year. They also had to go pick an automobile and what they were going to drive and what the cost of that was, and all that came out of their money. They also had to pay taxes, and so that was something new. As a teenager, that's something you're not really used to. And so it really kind of exposed them to a lot of adult decisions that they're going to have to make when they grow up. And then one of the kids I found really interesting, and he won one of the prizes that we had at the end because he actually started out investing all his money. And so even though he started out with $50,000, he had to spend $23,000 between his taxes and his houses and his insurance and everything that they had to buy. But he actually increased his income to over $62,000 because he started out investing his money. And so I feel like in doing these programs, some of these kids, it really shows them the importance of saving and investing and how that can really impact their lives. And so hopefully we can get them young enough to keep them from making financial mistakes and really teach them a lot of value in that going forward.
While we're on that particular subject, were there some kids that took the bait? I mean, you get a pile of cash in front of you, and all of a sudden you have the opportunity to buy a flashy car or a really nice home. Did any of them go that route and pay the price?
Yeah, let me interject. Yeah, we gave the kids, we bought a game called Spending Frenzy, the rights to it, which was developed by Owista First Nations. Traditionally, the Western tribes, they got a lump sum. They didn't do services like we do as a tribe, health or education or other things. Some people are very, very poor, and all of a sudden they come of age and they get this giant check. And so when you're hit with a lot of money, a lot of times it's, the old phrase, burning a hole in your pocket. People make some dumb decisions because they've had all this pent-up emotion and want and need, and they now they have the ability to get it, and they don't necessarily make good decisions because they're making an emotion-based decision. We had kids that we modified the game. We made that decision yesterday. We gave do-overs. In essence, if they bought too big of a car, or they got too big of a meal plan at the food, maybe they got the steak and lobster plan and really they needed the McDonald's plan, or they got the loaded out truck and they really need the 15-year-old car. We gave them a do-over, and about 10 of the 35 took advantage of that. So if their housing was too expensive, if their cars were too expensive, they initially wanted to go for the flash and then realized, hey, I don't have the cash now, I'm about to go bankrupt. They were able to sell those things back at a 10% penalty much like you'd buy a new car and you drive it off the lot and it's not, all of a sudden it's not worth as much. The same kind of reality. So, when they were hit going to the IRS booth immediately after getting that cash from the check, they learned how to cash the check. 25% was taken from them immediately. Mm-hmm. So they started the game basically stage 3 at 37,000 and they had 50. Mm-hmm. So they saw adult decisions in a real way, and they basically made everything was annualized. So we made what costs were rounded to money they could handle. So we either had $1,000 playbills or $100 playbills, and they made a year's worth of decisions as if they were an adult. And again, 30 of these kids were aged 12 to 15, so they're middle school. And comments I heard were, "It's hard being an adult." I had no idea that my parents had, or family had to make these kind of decisions. And why do we have to pay such high taxes? And I laughed at that one.
Now we kind of make light of it and a bit of a joke, but I've seen people do exactly what you've described. I remember a dividend payout in Alaska. One of the major corporations made a huge killing in the market. And with all their hundreds of tribal members, each of them got a $50,000 check. And some of them put it in the bank, some bought homes, or some bought the big fancy pickups. And I know of at least one situation where a guy was, let's call it a street person, blew the whole thing within about 3 weeks. I mean, just... And then the IRS shows up and says, "Okay, you owe us a big pile of money." And many of these people were unprepared to deal with it. So they got, as adults, they committed adultery, shall we say.
Yeah.
And so this is kind of what you're warning them about. And were they, that tax bite that we all get, did it really shock them?
Yeah, they were mad. They had this stack of cash walking around, and then they see that. But part of the why it's at the first of the game is they need to see that this is part of reality, and it's not something if I whine about it or complain about it that I can do much about. And I didn't have that conversation. But if somebody asked me, well, how do I do something about taxes? That's where you get involved with your elected people. And are they spending wisely, budgets, taxes? But everyone, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of boundaries, we're all paying taxes to someone.
Right. The simple answer to that question is pay them.
Yes, pay them first, and then you have something else to work with.
Now, what about the process of selecting participants? Eli, tell me about... was there a screening process? Was there someone that you wanted to get involved with?
Let me go ahead and take that question. I actually, we chose the Mvskoke Creek Nation Hufala Boarding School as the location. And we worked with Tony York, who is their superintendent principal on site. And we worked with Secretary Anderson, who's our Secretary of Education and Training. And we this funding for this, and I think we need to back up and talk about where this came from. This was a $3,500 grant that we received from the Oklahoma Native Assets Coalition, and some of that money also came from Kellogg Foundation, which is the cereal people. Mm-hmm. And so they gave us a grant, and it had two parts. One was to purchase the game and conduct the events, and then now that we have the game and we've figured it out and we've got all the materials made, we can repeat this. So we can do this over and over. And that was part of the first impact. So really, the demographic we targeted was 12 to 15-year-olds, early middle school. And it worked out statistically that it was almost ideal. We had 35 students participate. 5 were seniors, kind of player coaches. And so 30, when we had 20 in that age group, and just about 20 only that fit that group. So in essence, the school selected and identified by our criteria the people, and then it worked.
All right, now let me get back to you, Eli. The tribe has a lot of effort and energy invested in the project here. Now, what did you see that perhaps met your expectations, and do you feel like these kids walked out with a life skill now?
Yes, I think is what Chris touched on earlier with the 10 kids that went over. They saw the aspects of not working within your budget, which I think is a real challenge that I think most people struggle with within, being a young person when you first get out on your own, learning to live within that budget the first time that you really have to step out and really live within your budget and you can't lean on anybody else. That's always a challenge, and it's a difficult learning experience. And so hopefully we gave them this aspect so that when they do get out on their own, it will keep them from making financial mistakes. Because a lot of times that's a real challenge, because I think everybody's made financial mistakes at some point in their life. And so if we can reduce those or really limit the mistakes that they make, it can really give them a really good start in life. And then also, as we touched on earlier, we had one student got to really see the value in investing his money, saving his money. And so he went and he invested his money prior to purchasing his car and his house, and really accepting on those expenses. And so he got to see the value and kind of delaying that sort of gratification in a sense. And so I feel like it really taught them some life skills in that aspect. And also within the game, I mean, there was a lot of smiles within the room, and so I think that they had an enjoyable experience, and just hopefully gain some the concept of making smart financial decisions.
Let me pick up on those smiles you saw. What kind of feedback did you guys get from the participants?
Several of them really enjoyed it. They didn't, because several of them are from disadvantaged backgrounds, never had much money. The idea of what would I do, it wasn't just an idea. They got to kind of feel that, the joy and the stress of I've got this cash in hand and I've got to make these decisions. And a couple of them, they liked it because one of them told me they felt valued, like they felt like they were treated like an adult. And so they got to see that and see what it was like. Mm-hmm. And so I think that was enjoyable. Young people will surprise you more often than not if you give them adult respect and an adult task and an adult challenge. More often than not, they'll step up. And so out of that 35 kids, the 30 that were that young middle school age, most did more than what we asked of them, and they had fun doing it. And, it was a bonus that it was an excuse learning event from the school, and they were able to do that. But all of them we had some great corporate partners that helped us, Blue Cross Blue Shield, brought the Native American Affairs team. They ran a booth. We had many employees from the Creek Nation man other booths. We also had First Family Credit Union, and they ran the bank station. And so there were collectively, everybody left with a drawstring backpack and some little giveaways. We gave away the payday game to the person that did the worst, the student that did the worst, and that's a 30-day board game that he can play and practice. And he laughed about it too, because that game you lose if you have more month than money. If you have more money than month, you're good, but it's based on 30 days. The best investor, we gave a copy of Monopoly so he can get more hotels and things and expand on his habits. And the game of life we gave away. The idea especially with youth literacy, sometimes lecture is the best environment, but often if you can give the opportunity to put them in the circumstance where they play as an adult, an interactive game. And so what we created with the Spending Frenzy at the gym was a living board game where they were inside. And it really gave them the stress and also the benefit of making decisions like an adult, and they did well.
The flyer you have talks about distinguishing between wants and needs. First of all, I would presume there was some shock in watching that pile of cash start to diminish. And then were they, I think, imprinted with the thought that we have to spend our money wisely? I mean, did they take that away with them when they left?
I feel like that. I think one of the things, one of the exercises they had to do at the end is when they went around and made these purchases, they got receipts, and then they also got deposit slips, because part of the game is they had to set up a savings account and they had to put a certain portion into that. But at the end, they had to sit down and add and subtract it all together to see where they actually stood at the end of the game. And I helped some kids with that at the end, and that's when I think you really saw the impact come through on their face when they looked at, I started with this much, and it was, whoa, I spent this much, and now I have this much left over. And I feel like going through that exercise at the end, that's when I really saw it on their face of getting to see the full impact of their decisions. And so, and for them to get to see, like, I wish I would have had more left over at the end, or I thought I would have more left over at the end. I feel like going through that exercise at the end, that's when I really saw kind of a change in expression on their face, when it really hit them on kind of what the outcome was of their decision making as they went through the game.
So I started with 50,000 and now I have 13.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or none. Or,
I'm in the hole now.
Yeah. Or I had to sell my car back and buy a cheaper car, which, I think that really provides a good point to them on, especially when they go out and buy their first car purchase, and something to take into account. So hopefully that'll always stay in the back of their mind. So when they get out on their own and they have to go out and buy their first car, they'll remember that experience of, hey, I can't buy too much car. I need to stay within my budget. And so hopefully that'll stick with them, and then they'll make that decision going out, starting out early in their life, and that'll help them.
I have to pass by the hot Mustang and settle for the little Canyon pickup.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Or the four-door with 100,000 miles, but it's dependable,
Or curses of all, a minivan.
Yes, yes, yeah.
How uncool is that?
Yeah. And part of why we went with this game, and in part of what I would like to segue to a little bit, why we used cash, it's like learning basic math. And in our digital society, using debit cards or benefit cards or credit cards, you get detached from that money going that fast. And so by having a log, which we call the spending plan, it's a better phrase, more acceptable than the word budget. Budget's not a bad thing, but you're keeping track of what's going where. And cash-based interactive games help them see where money goes. It's sort of a segue also. We will be doing, our Mvskoke Loan Fund will begin doing credit counseling as well, because people can get taken advantage of by payday loans, by credit cards, by other things that are higher interest. And if they learn how to master their money, eventually they'll get cheaper money and they'll be able to do more things with it. But what we see is a lot of people in various demographic groups, especially lower income people, which are the Native American community and others, they get caught in that loop of where they're going to the payday loan person at several 100%, or finance place at 20, 30, 50%, where if in a couple of months or a couple of years, if they get things straightened out, they'll qualify for market rates of just a few percent, and then they can start investing. But there's an entire cottage industry dedicated to giving money to people that don't know how to handle it, and then they're stuck there. Mm-hmm. And so part of the impact of the financial literacy, the credit counseling, we're going to be helping with taxes as well at some point through a VITA program. Teaching people about money will help them not be taken advantage of, because the end-up goal is if people learn how to master their money, they'll build their own assets. They won't be taken advantage of. They'll help others.
Right. Now, makes me really want to hang on to that Tuknawa Balin. Next one I get, and then another $10 bill. Where do you go from here? What's next? I assume there is a continuation of your spending frenzy effort.
We'll probably implement this a few times over the next calendar year. We'll set up some different things. We have other partnerships that Secretary McIntosh and the nation have set up, more adult-based, lecture-based partnerships with Tinker Federal Credit Union on financial literacy, where they do different events. And so perhaps we've started the relationship with First Family Credit Union. Basically, we're looking for other opportunities to match a program to an audience and help them see that. But that will be an onward focus of a half dozen or so events over the next year that we'll do on the financial literacy side, as well as services that we do with the Mvskoke Loan Fund.
Okay.
Yes, as Chris mentioned, we earlier this year we partnered with Tinker Financial Credit Union. They have a financial literacy program. The start of that program is we did that with the summer youth, and we had all the summer youth participants go through a financial literacy program, and then we also had a financial literacy day on their first payday, in which they were taught about credit counseling and then predatory lending as well, the dangers of it. And so Within the partnership with Tinker, one of the things we're looking to roll out is financial literacy to the employees of the nation. And then as well as we're starting to work with some of the communities on getting it rolled out to some of the community meetings for the citizens that are interested.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for coming in today. Chris Coburn and Secretary Elijah McIntosh. A lot of good information there, and we hope to see more success, and we'll come back to this subject, I'm pretty sure. Maybe we can drag one of these students in and made a fortune.
That'll be great. Thank you.
All right,
Thank you.
Mado. All right, we're going to, I guess, just go ahead and jump into some community announcements here. We've got a little pile here that we want to take care of. First of all, there's an Indian taco dinner. It's a fundraiser for the Jesus Christmas Room following church services at the Springdale Baptist Church in Tulsa, 1511 North Lewis. And get this, it's $2.50 per adult, $1.50 per child up to 13. Now, that ain't bad for a taco dinner, eh? And if you want to participate, then you must RSVP 918-585-5903 by October 8th. They want to know the number of people interested so they can make enough and make a profit. That's the Springdale Baptist Church in Tulsa. Revival at Big Casita United Methodist Church. Let's Get Revived. That's September 25th, 26th, and 27th at 7 p.m. And they've got a number of pastors coming in to share their message with refreshments being served. If you're interested, get a hold of Gloria Lowe at 918-645-7426 or Stephen Whatgo-Long, 918-616-0381, and that's 3 miles east of Morris, Highway 62 south of Prairie Bell Road. Okay, Mvskoke Language Program represents the Mvskoke Language app. If you just got a new phone, iPad, iPhone, and Android, this app will fit on there, and you can sharpen your skills in the Mvskoke language. Now that I have a new phone, I'm going to see if I can't get that thing and get back to my beginner class. All right, the participants are still needed by a research study at the University of Tulsa to identify markers of risk of chronic pain in Native Americans. You'll have to attend a couple of sessions there, but get this, it's $100 a day, provided though to those who complete each testing day. So if you're interested, get a hold of the Psychophysiology Research Lab. That's quite a mouthful. 918-631-2175. And if you've got some talent here, there's a Native American talent call getting ready for the Tulsa State Fair. Office of Public Relations, they're looking for singers, artists, demonstrations, dance, music, whatever you've got, to appear on their program at the Tulsa State Fair on September 29th, and the deadline to enter is September 15th. So if you're interested, get a hold of Latasha Manoe at 918-732-7630, and there's no mention of a prize or anything, so you'll have to find that one out on your own. Okay, looking for a job? Macy's is hiring, and they're going to be holding a job fair Monday, September 25th at the, where we are, Macy's Job Fair, 75 Loop and 56. I would presume that would be the Dome. Anyway, that's all we've got time for here this morning. We hope you enjoyed our program. This is Gary Fife saying, Mado Mabo Hedgetscut. You've been listening to Mvskoke Radio. Join us again next week for more local, tribal, and community news and updates. Mado.